Welcome to Rubberband Live, the Australian recruitment and talent acquisition vodcast and podcast. I am Eden Haddock, your host and the creator of Rubberband, the recruitment network for all. Let's go live. And we are live. Welcome everyone out there to this episode of Rubberband Live, Insurance and Superannuation, the new sexy, with a question mark. But before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land that I live and work on, the Wadawurrung and Dja Dja Wurrung people. I recognise their continuing connection to the land and waterways. I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and I would like to extend this to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Welcome, panel. I am so excited about today's episode. Thank you so much for joining me. The insurance and superannuation industry is an industry that I am very passionate about as well. But welcome. We have Daniel Marsh, we have Alisha Hook, and we have Andrew as well from Halo. So welcome, panel. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks, Eden.
Thanks,
Great.
Eden.
Thank you. Great to have you here. So let's go around the room. I'd love you to, I guess, kind of introduce yourselves. I'd love you to give just a really quick summary of who you are and what you specialise in. And yeah, a little bit about you. So we'll start with you, Daniel Marsh. Welcome today. How you doing?
Okay, thanks for having me, Eden. Look, my background is that I'm the managing director of Blake Oliver Consulting. We're an insurance and superannuation specialist recruitment company. Established in 2017. My background is that I've been in sort of recruitment and insurance for about 22, 23 years. But give you a background. So I was originally working for Willis in London as a corporate broker. Also did a couple of years with Chubb and also a couple of years with CGU on the underwriting side. So in addition to being a talent specialist, I've also got a bit of background from being in the industry as well.
Oh, fantastic. And we'll go into that in a little bit more detail because I find that really interesting. That's a really great story. Yeah. Alisha, tell me a little bit about yourself, a bit of a quick summary about you and what you specialise in.
So I've been in talent and recruitment for 20 plus years. Hopefully you can hear me okay. I had to be on my mobile. Really enjoy sharing content about talent, experience, expertise. I've worked in superannuation for probably roughly about the last 10 years between two superannuation funds and currently the TA lead at Care Super.
Fantastic. Well, welcome. We're so excited to have you here, Alisha. Thank you. And Andrew, yourself, tell us a little bit about you and what you specialise in.
Yeah, I feel like the young one for a change. I've only been in about a decade here in Australia. I'm the director here at Halo within our specialist insurance business within personal injury, but I've been across agency, RPO, MSP, internal, so done the full circle of talent within insurance. So yeah, that's my intro.
Fantastic. And I probably should, for those who don't know, I've worked in agency and insurance as well, and I've worked internally in insurance too, which is why I'm so passionate about the industry. But let's go around the room. I'd love to hear a little bit more about your career in insurance and superannuation. So, Dan, you mentioned that you came from industry and you moved into the recruitment field. Tell us a little bit about that and how that came about.
Yeah, so look, insurance is one of those industries that people, I hate to use the expression that people fall into, and it's certainly something that I did as well. So I finished up at school, didn't go to university, but I just fancied getting straight into industry, and I got a job in the city in London. So did that for 6 or 7 years working as a broker at Lloyd's. It's mainly sort of specialising in marine and the VLCCs, and big large container ships and things like that, and super yachts. It was a really good career, but I just decided I wanted to do something a bit different, and there's always a girl involved. I was dating a girl at the time, and she was working as a recruiter, making quite good money and being quite successful. So I followed her into the industry and ended up recruiting for insurance. And again, it's been a really interesting field. I think the thing about insurance is people don't really understand how diverse it is. Again, it's quite a low barrier to entry to get into the industry. You don't need to have a CPA, like an accounting or a law degree to be a lawyer. But in insurance, you can just enter at any level and have a really successful career. And I think that makes it quite difficult, quite interesting from a talent perspective as well. to really make sure that you're working with people, not just based on what their CV looks like. It's actually what they're
Absolutely. Absolutely, and I'd love to talk a little bit about those career pathways as we progress through the episode today, because it's something that I've always found as well, Dan, that people coming into entry roles and seeing their careers really thrive, and people that I placed 10 years ago and seeing how successful they've become. I love some of those stories, so I can't wait to touch on that a little bit later. Cool. Alisha, tell us about your career in superannuation and, how it all came about and, I guess, the kind of roles that you work on.
Sure. So originally, way back, I started in financial services with Lloyds Bank in the UK, but on arrival in Australia, I started out with agency before finding my first internal role at UniSuper. At that time, fairly medium-sized fund, closed only for the university sector. There was probably close to 200 staff at that point. And I was recruited to work nationally on the financial advisory business predominantly, and then overflow with other roles. By the time I left, the team was probably more like 1,000. I'd added investment to my portfolio, in employee size, not talent team, obviously.
Yeah.
And by the time that I left UniSuper 7 years later, the fund had gone open fund, workforce had grown. I actually then left and tried something completely different. So went into the tech industry for a very short stint. So something quite different, probably seemed cool at the time, but it wasn't long before the appeal of super and that pullback attracted me back to taking on the role with Care Super. So they had never had anyone dedicated to talent when I joined. So that was the sort of part of the attraction of the role at Care Super, was to come in and be able to lead the talent acquisition function. And this was a bit more variety now. So now I work cross-functionally across the entire fund for recruitment and talent.
Oh, fabulous, fabulous. And do you know what? It's really funny. A lot of people out there that are working in the technology sector, which has been hit really hard, and a lot of people out of work, please, if you're listening or watching today, do consider a career outside of technology and in recruitment. Look at Alisha. She went into technology, but loved insurance and super so much that she went back. So, give it a shot. Have a look. It's not all... That's what today's all about, right? The new sexy. Excellent, Alisha. Andrew, tell me a little bit about your career. How did it all come about that you've specialising in this space?
Yeah, and I noticed you put a question mark beside the new sexy. I always thought it was sexy working in insurance. So yeah, I don't know why the question mark's there, but maybe it's an exclamation mark when you put it in there. But it's funny you say. DJ mentioned you fell into insurance. I think most of us fall into recruitment as well at one stage. Yeah. There's no set kind of educational pathway for it. Often like that in the insurance industry as well. You don't often get a degree in insurance. So I came to Australia. Sounds like we're all from the UK, which is no surprise there, being recruiters. I came across about 10 years ago, about 10, 12 years ago, got a job at Hayes, got some good foundational knowledge at Hayes. Was a temp recruiter working in the insurance space. I think about 240 temps working a week. So it was a very busy desk. And then decided to go in the RPO, MSP world. So I went to work at Suncorp, which was a really interesting experience. Came up to Sydney, obviously with huge events that were taking place, kind of natural events, whether it was bushfires or floods. So always a very busy role. And then went to a true internal role. I headed up the TA team over at EML. So they do specialist workers' comp insurance. At that time, I think it's about 700 people. They just won a big government contract, grow to about 2,500 within a couple of years. So a huge piece of work. Yeah, it was big. And I think that's one thing about the insurance industry. It's always changing. There's always opportunities, and whether it's to do with changing products or government contracts, that's the exciting bit about why we work in insurance, that ever-changing beast of what we do, which is kind of what I love doing. So yeah, now I work at Halo. I set up Halo about 2 years ago. So yeah, we're a specialist agency for insurance. So a full circle, but yeah, love what we do.
Fantastic. We've had a comment come through which is really great from Paula Kilby, that a lot of TA people who are out of work from the tech space are now looking at different sectors, but unfortunately are struggling to be noticed. So really appreciative, Paula, is that individuals like us are open to discussing transferable skills into their industry. And we'll talk about that, not necessarily even from a talent acquisition perspective, but from all different sectors. I mean, the industry, there are so many pathways from different backgrounds, as Dan mentioned earlier, and I can't wait to talk about that a little bit more. Dan, tell me though, in your opinion, what are some of the common misconceptions about the insurance and super industry?
Yeah, well, there's obviously a few, aren't there? So I think the first one is that it's a boring industry. I think if you're looking at insurance as a whole, I think it's sort of, well, I'm a bad example. Look, boring white men is one of those kind of what people think the industry is all about, and grey suits. It's not. It's really quite diverse. I think it's kind of the ugly sister to the banking industry and accounting, but again, it shouldn't really be seen like that. I think that's more of an Australian problem rather than a global problem. In the UK, in Dubai, Singapore, and Hong Kong, the insurance industry is already a really sexy, successful industry. A lot of people do want to work in it. In the square mile in London, for example, insurance and banking stand shoulder to shoulder as pillars of the London market. And the same in the Middle East and in Asia. It just seems to be in Australia that insurance is really considered to be a secondary education and career opportunity for people. Again, I think it's got to do something with the branding that the insurance companies are using and the brokers are using. There's a bit of a lack of talent coming through. If I look back to when I first came out to Australia 12, 13 years ago, a lot of insurance companies were offshoring their claims to Manila and India, etc., which meant those entry-level roles which young people would get into disappeared. So that if you speak to most senior managers in the industry, they started off in claims or some sort of junior admin role. Those positions just don't seem to exist as much as they used to, and that's really having a bit of a knock-on with the talent coming through. But look, I think the misconception, going back to that point, really is it's not an interesting industry, which is completely wrong. It's so diverse. We're talking about insurance, superannuation. It's really diverse.
And Dan, I was going to say, it doesn't really help with what's happening in news. Like, there's so many news articles at the moment around the insurance businesses overcharging or the Royal Commission. Like, every week there seems to be a new article coming out talking about what's happening in the industry. So it does impact younger people wanting to get into a role where they feel they're making meaningful work, which is, it's just difficult to try to change that kind of view of the industry. I don't know if you guys see the same thing.
Yeah,
you go, Dan.
I think that's a good point, but I think again the branding of insurance companies is not good. If you look around the skylines in Sydney and Melbourne, you see Aon and Zurich and Allianz. You see their logos everywhere, but when it actually comes to hiring, there's a bit of a disconnect with getting people involved. You look at companies like PwC. There's a massive scandal with them at the moment. I'm sure they're still not having any issues with their talent getting through the next range of students coming in. So it's got to be deeper than that. It's got to be a bit more strategic. I think we're very reactive as an industry rather than strategic about thinking longer term about how to change the conceptions of the industry. And that's something which needs to be done.
Yeah. But I think Andrew's right. I think you watch a current affair, you watch the 7:30 report, Four Corners, whatever it might be. We hear these stories about where people's claims have been denied, or older people who have been sold, funeral insurance packages that are a bit dodgy. We don't hear the stories of where insurance has really helped people at their time of need, and that's actually the vast majority. There is a very small minority when things go wrong, and we only ever hear about what goes wrong. Alisha, tell me, what do you feel the common misconceptions are about the industry? Would you agree or add anything to that?
No, I definitely agree with those sentiments. I do think superannuation tends to get a bit of a rap as being a bit slow-paced, not particularly commercial necessarily, and I think that's actually definitely a misconception. Or focused, it's kind of for older, obviously because superannuation, people think about retirement, but I think in the job market, it can also get associated with a more mature audience, and that there isn't some of those more interesting jobs that perhaps are, focused on a younger entry point. Is huge in super, for example. The whole UX UI around member experience is also massive, voice of customer. But I think sometimes people just tend to think of superannuation associated with investments, particularly in investment performance or financial advice or call centres where people are just calling up about general queries. But there's so much more to superannuation than perhaps the traditional focus.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is misconception is it's dull. There's not a lot of it's not a sought after career for people to go into. It can be dry. In some areas it can be a little bit dodgy because we hear these stories about where claimants have had their claims denied and things have gone wrong. In your opinion, like, how do we myth bust those misconceptions? Like, how as an industry, as an insurance and superannuation industry, like what really is the reality? What is it like to work in insurance and superannuation, and how do we break down that misconception? Dan, what do you think?
Yeah, look, I think again, as I sort of touched on, I think it needs to go right back to sort of getting people interested in the industry from the grassroots, and students obviously a great place to start that. Even I've spoken about this many times, but I think the industry, it is highly paid. There is an opportunity to travel, and it is incredibly diverse. The career of an underwriter compared to a broker is very, very different. And the same again if you're within claims. And I'll give you an example, which I've been given quite a lot. So if you're an engineer going through university at the moment and you want to work for BHP or BlueScope Steel, part of your career aspirations, you can actually get a job in insurance, work as an engineering underwriter, and suddenly BHP becomes your client. And not only are you going on site once a year, you're also liaising with the C-suite, and you're dealing with insurance managers and cross risk. So you can use your engineering degree to become a really successful underwriter within insurance, and within 5 years you're earning $250,000 a year. That's quite realistic. Whereas if you're going to go be an engineer working for a BHP, your career will be very, very different working as a civil engineer. People don't realise that an insurance background you can use all sorts of skill sets to really progress quite well. And I think that's something which the industry really needs to highlight and to do something about. Yeah, I think that's just one of the examples, really.
Yeah, so really targeting, and look, I actually think this is the reality for the recruitment industry as well, targeting high school students, students at university, and really showcasing those career opportunities and trying to get, I guess, younger people to consider a career in insurance like they do, as you explained, in Asia and the United Kingdom and other regions as well. Whereas in Australia, it just doesn't come front of mind. So it's interesting. It's definitely, something I think we can all work on. What do you think, Alisha? Like, how do we, the reality of, the way you described the superannuation industry, like, how do we myth bust those misconceptions, and how do we get the actual true nature of working in superannuation out there?
I think when we have interesting roles, we need to promote them more actively. That's something that I've been working with hiring managers on, making more LinkedIn posts, talking more openly, because I generally find that people in the superannuation industry are perhaps a little bit more conservative by nature, sometimes hiring managers. So sort of pushing them to have champions that will like and post and talk about things a bit more openly to attract a younger generation, and also really highlight that skills first focus. So the experience doesn't have to come from financial services. There's so many other sectors where we can bring in expertise.
It's interesting. I remember when I worked in life insurance in recruitment, and we would target people like nurses or chiropractors, like, to come into the claims team, and they had never considered insurance. And you would see them become very successful because they understood a lot of the medical terminology, how to work on return to work plans, etc. But they'd never considered it. There hadn't been a lot of that, I suppose. let's talk EVP work as an industry, I suppose, rather than a company, you know, like getting the insurance industry out there for people to say, hey, here's a new career path that I could consider, and this is what it could look like for me. I don't think people have it front of mind. Tell me, what do you think, Andrew? Like, how do we, you know, what is the reality, and how do we break down those misconceptions?
No, I think as recruiters within the industry, we're storytellers as well. We've got to be able to understand our clients, be able to also work with them to tell their stories, whether that's the amazing career progression we see within a business, or the success stories when a claim goes through a process and there's a really amazing outcome. And I think when you embed yourself into the business and you be part of those stories, you're able to talk about them as well. I think we're part of the solution as well. We've got to make sure we're also kind of flying the flag and we talk to loads of people every day. We want to make sure we're able to tell the amazing stories that do happen. Like, they hear a lot about the negative, but like when you buy your car insurance or buy your CTP or you buy your life insurance, it's a begrudging purchase. You don't really want to spend that money, but it's those moments that matter when you need them, and they're the stories we should be telling. And I think I do a lot of work in workers' compensation, and there are some really challenging injuries often, and I think there's some really rewarding and amazing stories when people have gone through life-changing moments for them and their family, and we're working with people, and the people we're hiring and making changes to people's lives, and that's meaningful work. And I think it comes back to telling stories about meaningful work, and that's what people want. People want to work somewhere where they can make a difference. And like you said, Eden, getting people from allied health industries, they also have got that same passion. So yeah, I think storytelling is a big part of that.
Absolutely. A really interesting comment here from Jose. Thank you so much for sharing. Jose has commented that what has disappeared from the industry over the years is investment in talent via cadetship and apprenticeship programs, which were quite common in larger insurance and broking firms in the past. So that's a really interesting observation. Thank you so much for sharing, Jose. Okay, so let's talk about these cool roles, right? I can imagine the kind of roles that you work on are vast and varied. So what does a day in the life of an insurance and superannuation recruiter look like? What are you working on? What kind of roles are you filling? What kind of backgrounds are you looking for in your candidates? Dan, I'll start with you.
Yeah, okay. Well, look, we tend to operate in the hard to fill area. So look, we don't really work on sort of volume campaigns. So if you think insurance, you might think call centers, perhaps somewhere like AAMI or UE. So they'll have huge kind of contact centers with many staff. We don't tend to do that. We tend to operate more in the sort of senior technical roles. So it could be, technical financial lines underwriter with IMI, PI, D&O experience, or the casualty sort of underwriter, or the same with corporate broking. So look, I don't tend to recruit face-to-face as much as I'd like to anymore, because it's obviously there's other parts of the business that we're doing. But I think as an industry, those roles will always exist. They are becoming a bit fewer and harder to come by for some people sometimes. But I think as an industry, I think it's just about being face to face and getting to meet clients as much as what we do. So day to day for our consultants and our business would be meeting candidates and clients, just trying to be as relevant as possible. And that's my advice I'd give to any sort of talent acquisition person, whether it's your client or stakeholder. Just really get to know your client and the people you're doing business with, to understand what the actual requirements are, and that keeps you relevant in the industry, really. So day in life of a recruiter should be meeting people, and if you're not meeting clients or candidates, I'm not quite sure what you're doing. I'm a bit old school about that.
No, agreed, absolutely. Alisha, tell me about the kind of roles that you recruit. What does a day in the life of recruiting at Care Super look like? What kind of positions are you working on?
It's been really, really varied over the time that I've spent with them. So I've probably recruited in practically every function across the business. So a number of head of roles at the top end, across risk, head of technology. We've also had a head of business partnerships, but then manager roles, lower level roles. There's been a whole variety. Currently, I am recruiting a corporate insurance specialist in that space. And I think one of the part of the post that I put is that insurance is often the real hero in in particularly when something goes wrong, as you've mentioned earlier, but also a desktop services lead. So it's just a whole range. In the past, I've been quite focused on financial planning and investments, but now it's just really, as you say, vast and varied.
Yeah. And that's exciting, right? I mean, I think Dan summarized it quite well. Quite often you think about, okay, if I was to move to an insurer or a superannuation fund to become a recruiter, I'm going to be filling volume roles into a contact center. But there is so much variety. I know when I worked internally in life insurance, one day I'd be recruiting an actuary, the next day I'd be recruiting a legal person, the next day I'd be recruiting a technology person. Like it's not all the same. It's a vast variety of roles, and I think that's exciting. Tell me, from your perspective, Andrew, like what kind of roles do you recruit? What kind of backgrounds do you look for in candidates? What does a day in the life look like for you?
Yeah, so at Halo people, we're probably more varied maybe than Dan. We do everything from the volume roles all the way up to a GM role across different lines of insurance, whether that's personal insurance or heading over into the GI space. So pretty varied scope of work. And you're right, Eden, when you think of insurance, you think the big brands, the Alliances, the Suncorps, the CGUs, but there is so much more to it, whether it's underwriting agencies, broking, some of the specialist consulting firms. So it's certainly not just your typical big brands. It's a lot more depth to it, which gives some variety. And I think there was a question before around technology, people from tech space moving into insurance, and how does that work? We brought a couple of people on from tech who've come across to work at Halo. And what I've noticed is there is not a skills gap, just the way of working is a bit different. I think in insurance, whilst there is certainly some technical skills you need, there's also, it's very people focused. You've got to, especially in our industry, it's about empathy, compassion, understanding the needs of the people you're supporting and working in. And I think that's a bit different to tech because it's just very different industry. So I think anyone coming from tech to insurance is part of the recruitment process is really unpacking someone's work, dreams, hopes, ambitions, what they love doing and how they love helping other people. And that's probably not what you normally look at in a tech role. So it's just a bit of a shift of mindset. But we've seen some success of people coming across from tech over to Halo.
Yeah, I agree with that. Oh, sorry, Alisha. Yeah.
There's a real connection, I think, with the end user, probably in both industries. With members, it's very member centric. So that opportunity, I think, in the superannuation industry, there's a real chance for people to feel quite impactful in their work, both with the end user in mind, but not only with the end user, but also within the industry, because there's so much we're trying to progress actually in your own work, regardless of the member. There's also that opportunity to be impactful in that way as well.
Absolutely agree. It's really funny because I'd love to talk about, some of the cultures of insurers and superannuation companies. And I know, we talk about making a difference. And that was something with Damien Mew at AIA Australia when I worked there. That was really drummed into making sure you're doing the right thing by policyholders, making sure you're doing the right thing for each other and helping, Australians to live healthier, longer and better lives. That was the purpose of the organisation. It was very much a culture of, being driven to deliver on that purpose of making a difference. And every one of you, Dan, Alisha and Andrew, have used that term already, making a difference. Tell me about some of the cultures of the companies that you work with or you're working for or you have worked for in the past. And do any sort of initiatives or highlights spring to mind in terms of those internal company cultures? Dan, what do you think?
Yeah, look, Andrew touched on it just now. I think you're with the insurance industry and superannuation, well, many more insurance and super. You work with sort of global mega brands who billion-dollar businesses, all the way down to family-owned broking firms. So there really is something for everybody. I think even from a talent acquisition perspective, you could be working for a family-owned broking company with maybe 100, 150 staff, or you could be working for a global broker with 1,000 staff. And obviously the pressures would be quite different internally depending on which sort of business you're working for. But I think as an industry, it's having that sort of ability to work in different ways. If you're working for a small family-owned business, perhaps you don't have the same sort of KPIs as you would working for a larger company, and it maybe even the pressures. But you're trying to think back to maybe some of the smaller firms we work with at the moment, where they've got an internal talent person. Sometimes that can be quite difficult for that individual because, as you mentioned, you could be trying to recruit across insurance, across trying to do technology, or trying to do senior leadership, all the way through to front of house. So it's those different roles within one business for one person or maybe two people can be quite challenging. And I think that's where some of the talent teams then sort of lean on companies like us to help out where necessary, rather than sort of going and find that sort of the other way around. So look, it's just a really diverse industry, and I think it's something which hopefully the profile is going to continue to raise over the coming years.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's that diversity of opportunity and the kind of opportunities that are out there for people when they work for insurers or superannuation firms. Well, from your perspective, Alisha, you've worked internally for a number of years now, both with Care Super and Uni Super. What is the culture like within the organisations, and what kind of, what are some highlights that spring to mind, or some initiatives that you've seen internally?
I have to say that the culture has been an absolute highlight for me, and that's what's sort of drawn me back to the superannuation industry. The culture in both funds has been outstanding, and probably the part that I have most enjoyed is really that they were large enough for the corporate structure to be in place and the benefits that brings, but also complemented by a really genuine, approachable culture within the business. So you could speak to the executives quite freely. You could speak to heads of, managers. Just people are really engaged with helping each other. There's a really genuine care that's quite difficult. It sounds so cliche, to be honest, but it really is there, and it's been in both funds, and it's been probably the most pleasurable aspect to work with. From the point of view of a internal talent consultant or partner lead, it's been some of the highlights for me has been some of the initiatives that I've had the opportunity to work on. I've worked on a talent attraction video, hiring manager training, improving LinkedIn company pages, and now we're just about to embark on a new ATS. We're also merging at Care Super. I personally haven't been through a complete merger before, so that's a whole new experience for me. And then for people coming into the industry, there is really so many career pathways and internal opportunities once you're in the door, that even if you want to career pivot, you don't feel beholden to a particular career pathway.
Excellent. Career pathways and opportunity. And a LinkedIn user has popped up that's where having strong internal mobility works a trait. And I think my experience within the industry, seeing people being able to stretch within their roles, be involved in different projects, different programs of work, and you would learn something every day. It's a culture of learning. I absolutely agree. So thanks, Alisha, and thank you, LinkedIn user. Andrew, yourself, I imagine you've got quite a variety of different clients. How would you describe the culture for employees within those clients? What is it like to work within those organizations?
Yeah, I think if I compare it to I've never worked in tech, but I certainly been to a couple of tech offices where they get free breakfast, lunch, dinners. There's arcade games. There's overseas trips. It's very different. I think.
Yeah.
It's not. If you think that's sexy, it's probably not that kind of sexy. But it certainly is in all my clients, and even when I work in internal in insurance as well, it's a people first business. They focus on the people, and it's about care. And I know Alisha mentioned care, but when we set up Halo Care, we built a whole business on care, because we have to align to the industry which we work. Our industry is about caring for people and doing the right thing and helping people. And I think Halo is built on care, which is unusual for a recruitment agency, but it's certainly the cornerstones of how we work, because that's how our clients work as well. So care is at the forefront. And if you think about that, it's how do they look at flexibility? How do they look at what's important to individuals through their different life cycles, whether it's someone who's a bit younger, someone who's going through looking to look at children or at their end stage of their career, and what different things are important to them. So I've noticed that a lot of our clients have a bit more of an individualized when it comes to EVP and benefits to suit individual needs. So not one size fits all. And that can be around flexible working hours. It can be 9-day fortnights. It can be different programs. It could be additional super. But I think it's about understanding individual needs. I think that's what the insurance industry do quite well.
So it's a personal connection.
Yeah.
I think that's awesome. And I think my experience has been exactly the same in working in that space, both in agency and when I've been internal. Those are the kind of cultures of the clients that I've worked with and organizations that I've worked internally in. So I couldn't agree more with all three of you. I think that's absolutely spot on. So let's talk about, we've talked about pathways a lot. So I want to get into that. I guess placing candidates into roles and watching them thrive, watching them continue to grow over the years. And that's why we do what we do, right? That's what's most rewarding, working in recruitment and talent acquisition. So I'd love to hear of any, specific examples you might have of career pathways that you've witnessed or you've played a part in that have been really memorable and special. Dan, are there any that kind of spring to mind for you where you've seen someone really develop their career?
Yeah, absolutely. I can think of an example off the top of my head. There's somebody who I placed probably 10 years ago at Chubb. He started off there within the OSD, which is like a sort of support to the underwriting team, and he's now a manager at another firm. And we just made a placement with him today. So he's gone from being a junior to running a business, and now being one of our clients. And that's just one example. Even Joe Liu, who answered one of his questions there, he's somebody that I've worked with a few times in the past, placed him as a senior underwriter, and then placed him again a few years later, and now he was a client for us. So it happens a lot in this industry that you can build long-standing relationships with people and help support their career as they move on to different positions and different jobs in different companies. And I think, again, just sort of talking about that, there's been a couple of examples where you got somebody who's a broker and wants to make that transition into underwriting. Sometimes on paper, it's quite difficult to make that transition if you're working with a talent acquisition person, but by having some good kind of relationships and a bit of goodwill as a recruiter, we can talk to the talent acquisition person, maybe go around someone's CV to give them the opportunity to interview, and then that makes the opportunity for them to present and get their placement happening. So it's quite a lot of times it happens. It's, again, the insurance industry is quite small, certainly in the space that we operate in. So you do tend to come across the same candidates and clients from time to time. So they do turn into friends outside of work, and you're beer in the mitre from time to time. That sort of thing happens a lot.
Yeah. And look, I know from my time, and it's going back a little bit, I don't want us to show our age, Dan, but when I worked with you in agency, some of the people, I was specialising in the entry-level roles within insurance and super. But I've seen quite a lot of those people become executive GMs over the years. And I know I said it was a long time ago, but we're talking within the space of 7 to 10 years that they've been able to develop from being on the phones to being right at that senior level of an insurance company. And some of them are global firms as well, where they're right at the top of the Australian operation. So I think that's awesome.
I placed someone into a role, I think 8 years ago on 75 grand, and we just placed her again recently at 300.
Wow.
So that's in the space of 8 years, from 75 to 300 grand. And that's not a one-off. It does happen, and it's just a testament of how somebody can have a really good career path in this industry.
Absolutely, and a really good testament that you don't need to study insurance for 6 years to be able to work your way to earn an exec salary at that level. And I think quite a lot of comments that came through earlier on the chats around needing to reinvest in talent that are coming out of the education system, right? And being able to showcase that, you might be studying a degree in business, but you move into insurance and superannuation and you can become an exec in 7 years. I mean, that's phenomenal. And that's what we need to really get across. Alisha, do you, in terms of, placing candidates into roles over the years and watching people thrive and grow and seeing them advance in their careers, do any kind of examples spring to mind for you?
There's so many. I might just touch on something that Dan said first, though, because I think it is really useful to work with recruiters sometimes to have a joint voice with a hiring manager when there is something different that they need. And that can be really effective, I've found, particularly we're a smaller fund and sometimes we need a combination of two types of roles rather than it just being siloed in one particular area. So I found that's been really effective. And in terms of example candidate pathways, there's just been so many. I've seen a financial planner grow from sort of a junior planner to a senior planner to a estate manager. I've seen somebody from client services into ESG, an ESG role, and is now an ESG investment analyst. I recently posted about Ben in Care Super, that's on my LinkedIn profile currently. He joined on paternity leave, has had 2 internal promotions, and now we're backfilling his last promotion, plus he's hiring in his own team. There's just lots of opportunity, I think, to move around. And that really brings a lot of joy for me personally as a recruiter and working in talent.
That's the good stuff. That's why we do what we do. We want to see people succeed. And when you look back and reflect and see those stories, we keep talking about making a difference, but it's phenomenal. It is such a good feeling, and it's why we do what we do. You know, we're always on a roller coaster, but having more and more of those highs, that's why it's a great industry to work in. Tell me, Andrew, have you got some examples where you've seen candidates that perhaps you've placed in the past, or people that you've witnessed in their career that have really thrived and had that really exciting career pathway? Tell me a little bit about your perceptions.
Yeah, so I when I was over at EML, I was head of talent over there, going through huge growth, and like insurance is still a talent short market. This was a couple of years ago, and we decided to set up a campaign over in New Zealand and try to relocate people from New Zealand, a competitor, over to New South Wales. Mixed success at the start, I'll be honest with you, but we refined the process. That's what we do. We can't keep learning. But the first guy that we actually relocated, David, he was like, "Yeah, I'll come over. Can I bring my wife too?" So we're like, "Oh yeah, we'll get your wife over as well. We'll find her a job as well, I'm sure." So he relocated over as a case manager. So he was a chiro physio EP by trade, I think. Came across as a case manager when I was at EML. And now has had 3 promotions, and now is kind of head of injury management at a small insurer. So we recruit for him as well, and we've helped fill out a number of roles in his team. But that progression over the last 3 or 4 years, where he's been relocated by a business, and now with his family, and now has stepped up 2 or 3 roles to run a whole team. They're the moments that matter, and I think Alisha said joy, and that's what we do every day when we hear these stories. That fills us with that joy.
Absolutely. And it's unusual, right? To see, and the insurance and super industry is unusual because you don't see those kind of success stories where 3 to 4 years someone has had 3 promotions and really advanced that quickly. It's really special. And it is unusual that there aren't many industries like it where you can see that. And I think that's awesome. It does bring joy. It brings joy to me. I love seeing people that I've worked with over the years that have advanced their careers. So thank you so much, everyone. So let's, we are running short on time. So I just wanted to go around the room, just some final advice for the audience. Dan, what would your final advice be in terms of insurance and superannuation being the new sexy, or the hidden sexy, we'll call it, right?
Yeah, look, my advice I give to everybody is, if you have an opportunity to meet somebody in this industry, then to do it. I think if you want to really build rapport with people you're working with, whether it's your internal stakeholders or if it's external recruiters or candidates, just try and get in front of them and really sort of understand what it is they're looking for. It gives you a lot of credibility, and obviously if you're prepared to meet somebody, I think it kind of reaffirms that you are wanting to do business and help them out. So my advice is just to meet people. You'll always learn. Listen more than you talk. It's another bit of advice I give to everybody as well. You don't learn much from speaking, but you learn a lot by listening to people. And in this industry, there's so much to learn, and it's such an interesting sector that that you can, like I say, it's cliche, but you do learn new things every day. I'm still learning. I've been doing it 25 years.
Yeah, agreed. Be curious. Have those conversations. Listen, learn. Agreed. Yeah. Alisha, final advice for the audience.
You took those words out of my mouth. Definitely be curious. There is lots of opportunity. It's interesting work. It can create an interesting career. It's stable. And I know with the current economy, that's something that often people are looking for. It's not going anywhere. So it's a really good chance to build a real flourishing career.
Absolutely. Stability we didn't touch on, right? I mean, there's always going to be need for insurance during economic downturn, during, difficult, situations in life. It's always going to need to be there. It's there to protect people and, the stability 100%. So thanks, Alisha. Final advice, Andrew, from yourself.
I security and stability. I think that is pretty sexy, knowing that there's something there and there's those opportunities. But I guess the growth opportunities, and we talk about career pathways, but that's a real thing. That's what we love doing, and there's so much opportunity coming into the industry. Whether you're coming into the industry as a recruiter to grow your skills and expand your offering and be a trusted expert, or whether you're looking to go into the actual industry to work in, there is lots of growth. So yeah, I think certainly, like Dan said, be prepared to ask lots of questions and kind of try and get involved, whether it's through industry events or networking. But certainly people are really open to conversations. Like, it's a pretty open environment.
Agreed. So audience out there, remember, have those conversations, be curious, learn about the insurance and superannuation industry. We have only scraped the surface today. Dan, Alisha, and Andrew, thank you so much for joining us. This has been a really awesome episode, as I said, in an industry that I'm really passionate about. And thank you so much for sharing your stories, sharing your opinions, and continue to have those joyous moments as you described. Thank you so much.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you
so much. Take care.